I think that there's a mistake that a lot of conservatives make, which is the mistake of assuming that because at this particular historical moment, religion, but I mean specifically when you're talking about the United States, you're largely talking about Christianity, the assumption that sort of that religious force is in its essence a conservative force, as opposed to just being a force that, at this moment, in, let's say, post-sexual revolution America, right, the sort of Christian teachings on sexual morality and so on tend to line up with sort of traditional conservative ideas about sexual morality. But obviously, if you look back across the sweep of Christian history and world history and so on, religion has been a force in all kinds of political directions. And I don't think that anybody living in, first or second century Roman Empire would have been confused and thought that Christianity was a, conservative force in that society, and that's been true across the board. I mean, and it's been true across the sweep of American history. I mean, I don't think that you can claim or pretend that Martin Luther King, for instance, was embarked on, ultimately a conservative project in the 1950s and 1960s. But I mean, I think there's also sort of, and this goes to these endless deep debates about, what is conservatism, right? I mean, is conservatism, defined by a kind of, a bedrock set of values and principles and so forth, or is it sort of conservatism in the sense, in a kind of, extremely simplistic gloss on Edmund Burke? Is it something that is, the defense of sort of the embedded wisdom of the past against the sort of fashions of the present, and a defense of reform but a resistance to revolution, and so on and so forth? And in that case, then conservatism, what is conservative in one era is not conservative in another, and so on. And I think there are sort of layers of complexity that get obscured in these kind of debates. I mean, to a lot of American conservatives, right, are conservatives of, they're interested in conserving liberalism, right? The John Locke and Alexander Hamilton and so forth that you talked about. But clearly in the 17th and 18th century, John Locke and Alexander Hamilton were not conservative. So you have a sort of all the way down problem that applies to both conservatism and Christianity, I think, where it varies with the times. I do think, though, that we are living in a period where there's an alignment between what you would reasonably describe as American Christianity and American conservatism in a way that there hasn't always been historically. And I think that drives a lot of the kind of stuff that drives you nuts.
Well, right. I do wonder whether religious conservatives would feel as enthusiastic about religious appeals when the Democrats do say, okay, we're fighting fire with fire,
right,
and start making arguments for
the social gospel,
redistribution of wealth. It is not at all clear to me that the Sermon on the Mount is a support of unfettered capitalism.
Possibly not.
I would argue not.